Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Sacoby Wilson. Welcome you to day two of the eighth UMD Environmental Justice and Health Disparities Symposium. Uh, Energy versus Power, Visions for the Future. Yesterday, we had a great first day with a number of sessions, awesome panelists from Dr. Jalon White Newsom, who talked about energy in the opening keynote. We have to be nimble. We have to have responsibility, right? We have to have generations working together. We have to evolve the evolution of the EJ movement, of the energy justice movement. We had Dr. Sharonda Buchanan, who talked about healthy human services, one of her work with the head of with the new Office of Environmental Justice. And we had a number of sessions on Title VI, NEPA, sessions related to Hurricane Maria, the 5-year anniversary of Hurricane Maria. We had sessions on indigenous populations. We had sessions on energy justice fights, right? We had sessions related to policy and climate change, and sessions about what are some solutions that we can implement to move forward on these issues. And we had a great closing plenary session, corporate action, corporate responsibility as in regards to environmental justice and climate change. We had a representative for Meta, representative from Orsted, the world's largest producer of wind power. We had our friends from Green 2.0. We also had the esteemed Dr. Adrian Hollis from National Wildlife Federation. In addition, we had our colleagues from NAACP who talked about, again, what corporations should do and what is their responsibility within this space. Now, today is day two, and we're going to have a lot of great sessions today. We're going to start the day out with a panel of esteemed environmental justice icons, and I'll get back to that. But I really wanted to just commend again my team for all the hard work in organizing this event and really making sure day one was a success. I know they're going to do a great job to make sure day two success. And we think about the sessions for the day, besides the open plenary session that we have, we're going to again talk about energy justice issues. We're going to talk a lot about Justice 40 today. There's going to be a great session on legislative action at the federal and state level, and particularly focused on the state of Maryland. There are going to be sessions where we really, again, dig into these issues around climate change, these issues around environmental justice, issues around energy justice, right? But as the great Jesse Jackson would say, we're just not here to problematize, we're here to solutionize. Okay, Jesse never said that, but y'all get my point. We want to talk about solutions, right? We want to talk about actions. We want to talk about how science can be used for action. Y'all heard me say it yesterday. Not science for extraction, right? Not science at colonial. Not science about what's wrong with you, but science about what's right with you. Heard Dr. David Patrick talk about asset mapping. What's right with communities? How we can build more community resilience, right? How can we make sure our communities are ready for climate change? How can we get at the undergirding issues, like the social determinants of health? How can we get the tools into the hands of the people, right? Uplift folks through empowerment science, uplift people through liberation science. That's what this symposium is about. It's about solutions. It's about change. It's about actions, right? And remember, you heard me say multiple times today, the folks who are at the front line should be at the front of the line. We're going to talk about money today. Justice 40, benefits, but all those dollars that are now coming out with this administration, groundbreaking, in my opinion, dollars to really help us get at addressing environmental justice issues, but making sure those folks who've been impacted by the dirty fossil fuel infrastructure, those, remember, most energy, environmental injustice issues are energy injustice issues. So you're going to address environmental injustice, you have to address energy injustice. We have to make sure there's clean energy opportunities for folks so that just energy transition is going to be a big part of our discussion today. So I want to thank our sponsors who've been really great when it comes to funding. Noble, go through the slides for me real quick. Go to the next slide. Of course, as it relates to the larger work of SIEGE, the Center for Community Engagement, Environment, and Health, thank those first set of funders. As it relates to this actual symposium, EDF, that's Wildlife Federation, Sierra Club, NAMATE, EPA. Thank you, EPA. Keep moving. Go ahead, Noble. Next slide. Union Concerned Scientists, NRDC. Thanks again for your funding. Next slide, please. Our folks who helped to co-organize some sessions, Crisis Foundation, and our colleagues at Mount Sinai. Go ahead, next slide. And then Choose Clean Water Coalition, SRAP, Climate Exchange, and School of Public Health. So again, thank you to the sponsors for their support of this event and making this the best symposium yet. This is the eighth one, and this is the best one. It's a timely one because, again, energy versus power, visions for the future. Now let's move on to our first session today, Noble. opening plenary with our speakers. So today, again, we have an esteemed list of speakers, icons in the environmental justice movement. Folks I've looked up to for the last my time as an EJ researcher and advocate, and I really want to again give them kudos and the opportunity to talk about that work. So the theme of this session today is funding the environmental justice movement, and we have again three icons in the movement. I'm gonna start first with introducing Dr. Robert Bullard. He's the director of the Robert D. Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice, professor of urban planning and environmental policy, Texas Southern University, HBCU, and a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. He is known to many, by many, as the father of the environmental justice movement. Then we have Dr. Beverly Wright, executive director of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, a center that I modeled my center off of to a certain extent, and member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. We wouldn't be here without Dr. Wright's work in New Orleans and the Gulf Coast and providing that leadership over the last 30 years. And then last but not least, we have Miss Peggy Shepard, co-founder, executive director of We Act for Environmental Justice, and another member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. As I said to Peggy recently, We Act is one of the most important EJ organizations in this country. And without their leadership, where will we be at when it comes to this environmental justice movement? And let's get into this discussion today, right, about funding the environmental justice movement. Funding the environmental justice movement. The landscape has changed, our esteemed panelists, when it comes to recent dollars that have been made available by the Bezos Earth Fund and other foundations and corporations like Google. What does this mean for your work when it comes to this funding landscape change? Do you agree that this is, groundbreaking? Do you agree that this landscape is there's more money available for EJ work? What is the impact of this new funding for EJ groups? And what are opportunities that you see for EJ groups because of this new funding? I'm going to start with Dr. Bullard first.
Well, first of all, thanks, Sacoby, Dr. Wilson. That's a real good question to start us off, because some of us were here at the very beginning of the movement when there was no money, but that didn't stop us from doing the work. And you'd be surprised how much you can do with money. So let's be real. The fact that this has been a long time coming, and that the work that we do is so important that we have to really push it at the front of the line and lift it up. And the fact that those of us who have struggled and labored in the fields to shake those trees, to make those dollars fall, we have to fight like hell to make sure that the right people pick up the apples and the oranges and all the fruits that's coming from this hard work. I see a ground shift in terms of resources that have been made available to build the capacity of our organizations on the ground, our institutions that support those frontline communities, and our networks and collaboratives. We have to make sure that the money that's flowing, and there's a lot of dollars flowing, we have to make sure that they flow to need. And the way it's happened over these last 40 years that I've seen, when federal dollars flow, they flow, money follows money, money follows power, and money follows whites. We have to change that paradigm to make sure that money follows need, and that those communities that are most impacted are in those rooms to shape the funding pattern and shape those dollars and provide the leadership for this new day. And it is a new day, but it's an exciting day, and it's a challenging day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to Peggy, please. Can you respond to those questions?
Yeah, I would say that the impact of this new funding can be very effective for the movement, but it also has to be used in a strategic way. This is an opportunity to advance the infrastructure for the movement that we all need. And that can only be done if we're very strategically thinking about the sectors and the organizations and the the support that we need to have a fully integrated, effective movement. Do we have our science arm, our research arm, our youth arm, our civil rights arm? How do we develop, our think tanks? So how do we develop um, that thought leadership that really creates the infrastructure for the movement so that, we don't have to depend on other groups for science and data. We don't have to depend on, scuttling around to find an attorney at the last minute, so that we have our own arms of work that really support and found our movement. So that's what this additional funding could do if we're strategic. We have fought David and Goliath struggles with no money and no resources. I mean, I know a lot of the campaigns that my organization is best known for, we did as we were still a volunteer organization. But think about the struggles we have won and what we could have done if we had the $100 million budgets that many of our Green Group allies have. What could we have done with a few well-placed $400,000, $500,000, $1 million grants that are routinely given to other organizations? So again, how do we come together as a movement, as regions, and really think about what are our needs? What are our regional needs to fight certain kinds of issues? You've got two folks here from the Gulf Coast. That's an important region that's very impacted. So how can they come together, bring funds together from different funders to really address the issues that they have regionally in common? So there's so many ways that this can be a really transformative.
Thank you for that. And just wanted to say, you talk going back to what Dr. Jalon Wanusa says. You just talked about the evolution of the movement, the legal arm, the think tank arm, the advocacy arm, the research arm, and the Dr. Bullard said we got to change the paradigm as it relates to how money follows whites, money follows power. Money needs to follow the people, as we've said, who are the front line. And Dr. Wright, what do you think about this new funding landscape? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Sacoby, and good morning, everyone. The only thing that I can say about this paradigm shift is that it's been a long time coming, but it's never too late. The Deep South Center for Environmental Justice began with a $50,000 grant from an HBCU. Xavier University gave us $50,000 to start the Deep South Center. And that $50,000 actually led to an unbelievable reduction in emissions in Cancer Alley with $50,000 and will. And so now to finally be at a place where we can truly build an infrastructure of support for communities and this movement is quite unbelievable. But specifically for me, it's about building capacity of community-based organizations to participate in decision making in all of the ways that we talked about on the legal end, the science end, in all of these different areas so that we can move this environmental justice agenda forward. Without communities being armed with what they need, nothing that we do will in fact work. And we're always interested in everything that we do being community driven. I believe that our center should be endowed. If you really want to see that we can do work and remain in existence as the three of us all in our 70s, sorry to put that out there, but it's true, continue after we are just too old to march, then we need to get these centers endowed. The concentration on pulling youth into our movement, getting them excited and getting them trained to replace us is very important. All of that requires money. We've done it without money, but boy, I'm excited about what we may be able to do with money. And I've been able to hire a grants manager for the first time in 30 years because of some of this money that we have now. So it's exciting. Yes.
No, thank you for that. So you talk about capacity building and durability. We gotta focus on capacity building communities and make sure it's durability, and you gotta bring more youth into the movement. And so I thank you for those comments. So go. You don't have to go on this too long, y'all, because I know we have other questions to get to. I know we want to make sure we
Yeah.
save some time for the audience too. Is there a downside to large corporations that have foundations step into the EJ space? Do you see any challenges, gaps, potential problems there? I'll go to Miss Shepard first.
Well, for some organizations, that's simply going to be greenwashing. You know,
Hmm.
so but what's the downside to somebody who's considering being a recipient? Well, you've got to understand the environmental position of those companies. Are they taking actions that are destructive to our communities? Do we really, and if they are, obviously, we don't want to be associated. We don't really need to be talking to them. Um, but again, I think we've got to do that research. We have to understand, a lot of foundations are coming and saying, could you talk about environmental justice to our employees? That's a good thing. We need to share our perspectives, especially with audiences, we haven't really, been open to in the past. So again, um, I think it could be helpful. It depends on the organization, depends on the allyship, or is this a transactional? Sure, let's give you 30,000 for your upcoming event or whatever it is. So I think we really have to understand the motivations and what that organization is, and do they have any negative actions in our communities?
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Wright.
Yes. Of course, there are downsides to, large amounts of money coming into our organizations, when in fact they have an agenda that's really the opposite to ours. And that has been my life forever, working in the chemical corridor with Shell, Oil, and Dow, wanting us to sign on so that they could take the edge off of the work that we've been doing. And that's the one fear that you have. On the other side of that, you have corporations who are now motivated to do work in a different way. They realize fossil fuel needs to end. And so they're coming to us with their diversity programs and different things to support our youth. And so when I say when we take money from these corporations, we put strings on the money that we get. In other words, the strings are ours. This is how we're going to use it. We will not we will continue to speak out on all of the horrible things that you have done and you are still doing. We will give you credit for the positive things that you are doing. And that's the only way that we can move forward. Very quickly at HBCUs, you don't think we need the scholarship money from Shell and Exxon and all of these companies? Absolutely, and we will take it. But we're taking it to advance our students, and in the process, we try to train them in a way that they don't become involved in the same damaging kinds of activities to our communities that these companies have. And I have seen our students injected into organizations like Shell and have conversations that helps them to make different decisions
Mhm.
in the direction of protecting our communities.
Thank you
I'll
for
stop
that.
there.
That's a powerful statement. What you just said, Esmel. Dr. Bullard, can you chime in, please?
Let me just say, over the last 4 decades, uh, I have been approached. Millions have been dangled in front of me by some of the worst corporations and the worst bad actors. And I have said, no, thank you. We cannot do this work if I'm basically an expert witness against a company that has been a bad actor, and we don't want that. We can do without that. And so there has to be principles involved in integrity if you are to do the work. You can't work on both sides of the fence and maintain your integrity and trust with communities. But we do have to try to influence those corporations that want to do right, that want to do good, and want to move to green, clean energy and the types of justice built into their hiring and into their operations. We encourage that. And we have to accelerate that as our country become more and more diverse. But we don't have to compromise our community's health or sell out our values and ethics.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. So, continue along this line about foundations. What are some model funding programs from foundations you think should be replicated? I mean, I look at Packard Foundation's new efforts, the Mosaic program. Can you talk about any that you see as models, successes that you want to see replicated throughout sort of philanthropy, that philanthropic sector? And I'll go to Dr. Wright first. And you can just, not a lot of time on this one, just what are your quick thoughts about
Okay.
some model programs? Go ahead, Dr. Wright.
Well, believe it or not, EPA had one of the best models starting back in the 1990s with the CUP grants that supported what I think is the best model, the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. But moving forward, there have been many foundations who have now begun to fund the model that I prefer. Kellogg Foundation, first it was EPA, not then Kellogg. Packard also funds us, but JPB has been the most consistent in embracing a model that allows regrants to community-based organizations to build their capacity so that they have their own voice. We're always about, if you want to build a movement, you have to make certain that people who don't have voice get voice because they remain in the fight when we move on to other places, and that's how you grow. So I would say the JPB has a model. Well, they supported our model. I don't know if that's a good way to say it. That has really helped us to stay on our feet with communities, giving regrants over 500,000, which is amazing for a small organization like us, and building on the ground power. I'll stop there.
So thank you for that. Let's go to Dr. Bullard. Can you chime in, please?
Well, I'd say if we're talking about integrating and working across disciplines, whether we talk about health, environment, and community, I think Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has been a model for building community citizen science, for research, new data, and for emphasizing the equity and racial justice lens, not running away from it, but building it at the core. There are a lot of foundations that we, 10, 15 years ago, when we were talking about racial justice, is environmental justice, is climate justice, economic justice, we couldn't get a dime because we had the racial justice in there. So I think it's important that those foundations recognize that integrative approach. And I think Robert Wood Johnson has done a great job.
Okay, thank you. And Peggy, can you chime in on that, please?
Yeah, I think one good trend in the fundraising in the foundation field has been around participatory fundraising, where you're bringing in peer groups, environmental justice groups, or whatever groups are in the sector that you're funding to be part of the grant making, to be advising, to be helping to set criteria and standards. I think we see funds like the B Fund that's been set up primarily working hand in hand with people from the environmental justice field to really begin to fund, the smallest beginning grassroots groups so that they can get a toehold and get some capacity. And so that's the B Fund has been a great model. But then you've got these other funds like the Hive Fund, really focused on gender-based organizations, focused in different parts of the country that really think much more progressively about how to fund groups who are really the most progressive and really have perhaps an untraditional perspective and way of doing things. So I think that there are a number of models that are beginning, and we need to influence those and try to work with some of those because they're better than just an intermediary.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the intermediaries try to become groups of their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a question. I think I have a question later about some of those groups. So thank you for that. So next question, The Justice 40 initiative. Now, y'all are very familiar with the Justice 40 initiative, Executive Order 14008, as we move from a dirty energy economy to a clean energy economy. 40% of those benefits should go to disadvantaged communities. Now, how are we making sure that those benefits get into communities? Because you got to talk about the dollars to make the benefits happen. So, do you have any thoughts about how to ensure that the dollars get into EJ communities to make sure they receive those Justice 40 benefits? Do you believe financial assistance, technical assistance programs are what needed? And what kind of programs have to be put in place to make sure, again, those who are at the front line are at the front of the line when it comes to monies to get the benefits? Let's go with Dr. Wright first on that question.
Yes, surprised. I'm surprised you asked us that question, in that we have a huge Bezos grant to do just that. And so finding a way to make certain that dollars that are supposed to go to our communities get there has been a 200 years, 300 years struggle. And we've seen these, these large scale projects move forward, model cities. It goes all the way now to Justice 40, trying to get monies to our communities. And I think that Dr. Bullard, Ms. Shepard, and I have the answer. It requires a lot of money, and it is a huge effort. But we have come together. And so my work basically, and this is always needed. First of all, you need to educate the community and give them the tools that they need to participate. Then you have to move to another level, which includes a whole lot of research to make certain that somebody is monitoring where the money is going and training communities to advocate for that. And Bob's word, always having a strike force that can jump in and pounce on whatever's going on immediately. That includes lawyers. And then, of course, we have Peggy that will be working on all the policy issues and messaging. And so it's going to be a very difficult process, very people intense. And when I say that, I mean it's going to include hundreds of people for us to get there. And I think about one community victory that I had that included 150 people in organizations to get there. We're looking at that again, and being able to organize across the United States with emphasis in areas where we know, the Deep South in particular, people who are actively working to make certain that we don't reach that point. So it's education and training, it's research, advocacy, strike force, and policy as it relates to legislation, and developing relationships with politicians so that you have this conversation and you can attempt to drive funds in the way that it should. So it's a huge problem. For the first time, we're resourced to do it, and we are beginning that whole process. Thank you for that question, Sacoby.
You're welcome. Thank you for that. Dr. Bullard, you want to follow up on what Dr. Wright stated?
Well, yeah. I think this is something that the three of us have been working on the WEJAC and fighting to make sure that there's a framework and there's a screening tool that can identify where the benefits are and try to force the hand to say, translate the benefits into dollars so that we can track those dollars. And also where there are roadblocks, and we know where the roadblocks are given our work over these last decades. The roadblocks will be when the money goes from the feds to the states, in particular those red states, where those legislations and those governors and those agencies will not send money to the blue cities. We have to have a way to pierce those roadblocks and get those dollars to follow the need. And I think what we have today is an opportunity to get our organizations on the ground, our networks, our consortia, our collaboratives, to be in the positions to force those decision makers and policy makers to do the right thing. And lastly, I think we should not just stop with the Justice 40 in terms of benefits. We also need to apply that Justice 40 framework and lens to that $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure law, because we talk real dollars. We need to apply that and that 40% minimum. And if this legislation passed with the Inflation Reduction Act passes, then we need to apply that Justice 40 lens to that. And it shouldn't be just $60 billion out of the 369. That's only 16%. If we apply to 40%, we're talking 147 billion. Let's think big and do the right things and fight the fight like as if we're going to win.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. I have a few follow-up questions related to the Inflation Reduction Act, but I'll definitely come back around to your points you just made. Peggy, can you chime in on this question of Justice 40, getting those dollars and benefits to the communities?
Yeah, I think we've got to ensure that, first of all, we've got community collaborations in our localities that are informed about Justice 40 and understand how to hold the elected officials accountable, how to make recommendations, to really set up Justice 40 review teams in communities so that we can be able to do that monitoring. But basically, what we're going to need for the long term is that we've got to be able to have the ability to track and monitor state and local funding right now and historically to understand where it has been going, not simply to understand, but to document and communicate where it's been going so that we can continue to make our case. And once we have an infrastructure where we can actually do that kind of budget monitoring, the way some of these small budget groups do, we need that infrastructure right now, and we're definitely going to need it to really effectively track where these Justice 40 dollars are going, because this isn't a one-time thing. It should be happening over the next 8 years of the Biden administration.
I like that. Go ahead.
I
Keep
like
going,
that.
Peggy. That's all you got to say. Like you in on that note. I got you, Peggy. Good job there, Miss Shepard. I'm gonna do a follow up. Now on that last point, I like that last point. But going back real quick to WeJack. So y'all all are founding members of WeJack. What future funding programs? I think you were getting to a little bit with the next 8 years. Thank you for that setup, Peggy. Would you want to see implemented in states like you were saying, in regions in which you work? And what are the metrics? What are the accountability, bounds you want to see? So what are the metrics? What are the programs you want to see to get that durability that Peggy talked about over next 8 years and beyond, right? So what are your thoughts about that? I'm gonna go to Dr. Bullard first, and this be real quick, so I can get to the next question. But I'm gonna get back to Inflation Reduction that question. But go ahead, Dr. Bullard.
Yeah, I think what we have to look to is that fill those gaps that are missing, that were cut on the table in terms of the budgets. Those things that were left out that we have to work to get back in over the next 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, whatever. Have that long view strategy to make sure that we're bringing in our equity into our transportation, energy, housing, food and water security issues around empowering our organizations, infrastructure to go after the kinds of things that we know have been missing, and we need to try to get those missing pieces to fill those gaps in this puzzle. Put those pieces together.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Peggy, can you go next, please?
Yeah, I think that we're going to have to ensure that we have strong federal agency relationships in order to understand how these programs and projects are going to be implemented in the states and to be able to influence that. Because we know that in some states, even in the best states, money also always gets siphoned off to somebody's favorite project. So how do we really begin to impact the way these federal agencies do business and help them do business differently? Because when we say to them, how are you going to ensure that the state is sending this money to a disadvantaged community? They kind of shrug because they don't have anything like that in place. So much of the money goes out as formula. And so how do we begin to change that idea? Just because that's the way it's been doesn't mean it always needs to be that. Maybe the formula needs to change.
Thank you for that. Changing the formula, using tools, looking at your most impacted, your most at risk, your folks who again are dealing with these issues, the cumulative impact of these issues. Thank you for that, Dr. Wright.
Yes, this is I guess, our hardest question to me, especially coming from a red state, how to make certain that the implementation of Justice 40 is fair and equitable and it meets the needs of the people who are there. And in all of our meetings, we've had the WEJAC meetings, we've had the different agencies come to us and ask us, how can they do this? And I'm like, I think that it's about time that you start answering your own question. And
Mm,
that means doing a real autopsy of your organization, looking at, and there's a long history of it, looking at other large scale projects that were meant to shift things for for people in this country in general, and what stopped it from moving forward. And at that point, you can make the change. So you need to do your own autopsy. And I believe that our biggest problem right now is cultural racism. Coming from a southern state, you know what I'm talking about. You have
mm.
the best program, all the guidelines are there, but you got one racist person sitting at that desk that says, oops, nope, and everything goes in another way. So the best plan, can be destroyed with one person making a decision to do something different. So that autopsy is going to have to come from the federal government itself. We are more than happy as researchers, as activists, as advocates to keep an eye on things and follow it to see where it's about to go bad before that happens. And that's that strike force that Bullard was talking about, and of the monies that we're getting from Bezos, especially down here in the South, are very necessary for us to monitor these things. Some states will be able to get their Justice 40 commission. I can tell you right now, Louisiana will not.
Mm.
So New York will get lots of things, but in these red states, we will not. So we have to come up with another way for following the dollars and finding and just building the capacity of our communities so they have voice, to say this is happening now. We need them before cameras. There's all kinds of training that we need to do with communities to make certain that this happens. But it's a fight that we're in, and we intend to move forward in every way that we can to make sure that WEJAC is just and equitable in the way that way it's supposed to, the way it was designed to be.
Thank you for that. And just to add to that point, we fight for this Justice 40 initiative. We fight for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I'm gonna ask the question about Inflation Reduction Act. So you got the bill, the act passed. Now, as Dr. Wright said, you got to fight to make sure the money get. You can't assume that the money's gonna get there. As Dr. Bullard said, you got environmental racism is real, okay? And environmental racism, cultural racism is real in the funding. How you expect racist systems that's been racist before doling out money to dole out this money better now if we don't have this stuff in place, as Peggy just said? So that fight is a fight at the state level. That fight is a fight at the county level. That fight is a fight at the municipal level. So I just want to reiterate those points. We got to be on the ground, have a strong ground game. At least start talking. But y'all got me excited. I'm gonna get back to this next question. But I agree everything y'all are saying. I will make sure the audience understands the fight for the day. You got to be on the ground, not just talking about it, but being about it and walking the talk and getting out there on the streets and getting to the municipal offices and your state congressional offices to make sure that money is getting down to the people. Let me be quiet. Next question. The Inflation Reduction Act. This act will provide, as Dr. Bull alluded to, Dr. Bull rounded it up to 400 billion, but you said the exact number. 400. I'm going to say 400 billion. We need more, as Dr. Bull said, for climate change, energy transition, and environmental justice. What are your thoughts about this act? Potential benefits? Any problems with it? Any areas of concern? Again, related to implementation. This is another question. I'm gonna go to Peggy first on this. What's the implications? This groundbreaking, but what are the implications of this act? And what are the benefits and potential issues? Go ahead, Peggy. You go first.
So, so it's hard to celebrate a zero-sum game.
Mm.
So, this is all a double-edged sword. We're going to be able to advance towards our greenhouse gas reduction goals.
Mhm.
That's a good thing. And we're going to burden the usual suspects, the usual EJ disadvantaged communities. We're now going to burden them even more. So some people would say, wow, we're getting more than we've ever gotten. And I'm sure the green groups are saying that. And the environmental justice groups are saying, well, we're not used to having anything. So perhaps we'd rather not uh, have these resources towards climate because our communities are now going to take another step back and be burdened through unfair permitting, through fast track of pipelines that impact almost every state in the country with these pipelines, again, keeping our dependence on oil and gas. So it's a step forward in some ways and a step back in many ways.
Yeah, thank you for that. Dr. Wright, you go ahead and go next, please.
Yes. This particular bill is, as Peggy says, I see it as one step forward and two steps back for people of color communities. And speaking for a state like Louisiana, that's number one in requests for permits for CCS and unproven false technology. We're looking at our communities who are already heavily overburdened with pollution, with cancer rates and death rates higher than than in any other places. There is no relief. So the Inflation Reduction Act for me would have been wonderful if, in fact, there was something in it that was going to not only move away from oil and gas, but transform the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor in a way that there's solar panels and places for
Mhm.
people to go hunting and fishing. That's not what's happening. It will be a continuation of what was there through oil and gas, now replaced with other things like CCS, which may in fact be worse than the effects of oil and gas, and not necessarily reducing greenhouse gases to reduce so that we can meet our climate goals. So it's almost like for Christmas you get a lot of toys and you're happy. Then you break up half of them, so the rest of the year you have nothing to play with, or you break up all of them. There's a real downside to this bill for communities of color. There's some positive things for the general population, or what you call the greater good, but we're
Yeah.
still that suffering from what everybody else will benefit from.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Wright, and insight. Go ahead, Dr. Bullard, please.
Yeah, I agree with Beverly and Peggy, and the once again our frontline communities, those communities that had suffered uh, first, worst, and longest from the impacts of climate change, those who have contributed least to the problem, will have to once again uh, take the bitter pill and swallow it to get those benefits and investments that are in there as we move to, uh, uh, I guess, lowering greenhouse gases on one hand, but at the same time, we're being stuck with offshore um, uh, drilling permits. We're stuck with pipelines, and again, we're stuck with false solutions, as was said. CCS, which will allow carbon capture storage, which will allow these companies to take the attention off of their continuous polluting and be diverted against sleight of hands kind of thing. So it's again the the trade-offs uh, are such that we have not changed the paradigm. Our communities are always the Missouri Compromise of
Mm.
1862. Our communities are always traded off in terms of our health for the sake of that's the price of doing business. And at some point in time, we have to say, at what point do we get in the front of line for the best of the best? This is not it. It will likely pass. And the idea, as I said before in a statement that I wrote for the Bullard Center's statement on the bill, is that if you're talking about $60 billion in this bill for environmental justice, why not use the Justice 40 framework, and talk about 40% of this climate part, the 370 billion. That would be more than 60, and my calculations would be that's only like 16%. How about pump up to 40% and go to 147 billion? That might make the pill easier to swallow, even though it is a bitter pill. So I'm hoping that the House will kind of like look at those numbers and calculations and burdens, and say, if we are going to be burdened, then put more monies in there to ease those pain, greater investments to clean up and to reduce those pollutants, and have some real benefits that could happen quicker, as opposed to having to wait 25, 30 years. There's a way to do this without just a race to the bottom, and it's easier to do because we don't have the power to stop it. And right now, the train is moving fast and it will pass. But we have to raise those hopes and voices that we would like to see that North Star and justice for all. And justice for all. That should be the North Star, and not what you can compromise and somehow trade off, and in a way, as some folks would say, throw us under the bus again.
Yes, sir. I hear what you're saying. Making sure that we don't have this race to the bottom. I think it's a very important point. And making sure that those voices. I was going to say, you're talking about the fact that there needs to be distributional justice. Like right now, the way it's outlined, this bill is not providing the benefits to those, again, who are the front line of fence line when it comes to this energy transition. So where's the justice in the energy transition? And then also getting back to that theme of the symposium, energy versus power, right, Dr. Bullard? We got to build community power so we can get this just energy transition that may not be fully captured in this current iteration of the bill. Now, I want to save some time for questions from the audience. I'm going to skip a couple of questions. So let's go to your final thoughts about this funding the EJ movement. It looks like the movement will be both televised and also funded now, right? So what are your final thoughts about where we are with the movement being getting some dollars finally? Not enough dollars. This is an investment, right? We make a dollar out of 15 cents. We maybe got 30 cents now, as Dr. Bull was just saying. We need more money. We need 40% of that dollar minimally, right? That's the floor. That's not the ceiling. So I'm talking too much, y'all, again. What are y'all's final thoughts? I'm gonna go to Peggy first before we go to questions from the audience. Go ahead, Peggy.
So my thoughts are that we have not come together as a movement for decades. And I think we need to come together strategically to really consider, since there is a consciousness raised around these issues where there is more funding, how can we consider the big ideas that are needed, the big vision that's needed to really advance this work, not just in these small, tiny, incremental steps, but really advance this work, advance our perspectives and the capacity of our organizations. And how are we going to do that? What do we need to do that? To me, those are the questions and those are the actions we need to take over the next 2 years.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Wright, please.
Yeah. My thoughts are that, and it's really personal. I don't know if I should say this in a large setting, but people know me, I'm going to say it anyway. I really believe that African Americans in particular need to find a way to come together to deal with environmental justice issues that affect everyone, but we are affected a little bit differently because we have a unique status with this country. We are the only group that was legally enslaved. And it seems that Whereas other groups are able to get some really great funding to come together, Black people are not funded in the same way to come together to deal with their issues. So this is a call for more support for everyone, but also look very closely at your funding and see how much of it is going to African Americans. And I think we get less funding as a group than others do. If we are expected, and we're always expected to lead, and most times we do lead, but we don't lead with the support that other groups get. So I'm especially in the Deep South. I think that Black Southerners in particular, but Black people all over the country, need to have a way to come together to deal with some problems that are specifically theirs. Policemen are killing people all over, but if you notice on the news, it's always an African American person who's been shot in the back or a woman that's been shot. You don't hear the same kind of killings of other minority groups, and that speaks to the status that we have in America that is different. We're not an immigrant. We were enslaved. And so I think that Black people in particular need to come together. And then all of us as a group need to come together. But my emphasis would be we need to figure this thing out. While even in the midst of everything, we're still the ones that are selected for the worst treatment. The only other group that has that particular status would be Native Americans. And their status is recognized as being different and particular in their arrangements with the federal government. Ours is not. But we have lots of issues. So I'm asking for that. We really need to come together as African Americans first, get our act together so that we can then enter these larger conversations with all of the other groups that are being marginalized and attacked and harmed together. So that's really my thoughts. That's all I think about almost every day is how we can strengthen the ability of Black people to participate in the way that they should to bring about change.
Thank you for those powerful words, Dr. Wright. Close with you, Dr. Bullard. Go ahead, please.
Well, as someone who's worked with young people all of my professional career, students, young people, I think it's important that we continue to resource, educate, train, mentor, and try to strengthen our intergenerational mobilization. I'm a boomer, proud of it, still standing, still fighting. But Zoomers and millennials and younger outnumber us, and they're coming into their own in terms of being in the majority. I think we have to harness that new majority and harness that energy, like the three of us who came of age in the 60s, the 1960s. We were fearless. We're not afraid to go to jail, get expelled. We have to harness that energy of today, of that group, and come together, that intergenerational mobilization. We are the majority. We will make the majority, and we can change things, and we have to believe that we can do it, and we have to have faith. But as was said, faith without work is dead. We have to work hard to make these transformative changes. Nothing's going to drop in our lap. Nobody's going to give us a damn thing.
Yes,
We
sir.
have to fight for it. And as a being a Vietnam era Marine Corps vet, we have to fight, and take the fight to the enemy.
Yes, sir. Thank you for those words. So I want to thank y'all for this, for your comments and powerful just discussion we've had. I'm going to take a few questions. We have about 10 minutes for the transition. I want to give y'all 5 minutes to transition to the concurrent blocks. So just let everybody know the concurrent blocks are going to start at 11:10, I believe. But I want to take a few questions that we got from the audience. So there's been several questions around CCS. Can one of you explain what CCS, what that acronym stands for, and what does that mean as it relates to climate change and environmental justice issues?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Go ahead, Dr. Wright.
Yeah, since we're leading the nation in wanting, as we always do, we want trash and anything bad in the state of Louisiana. carbon capture sequestration. It is this whole notion that we can suck carbon out of the air and then secure it in the ground or in pipes, as we do with gas, oil and gas, to reduce greenhouse gases. So, to be honest with you, we call it a false solution because sucking carbon out of the air is not an easy thing. You're sucking carbon, you're sucking PM 2.5, you're sucking all of the other hazards that are in the air, and carbon dioxide is extremely corrosive. So there's not a metal containment that can keep it there because it rusts these things away. So it is a science that's they're trying to perfect, and we are once again becoming the canary in the mine. We are the experiment. They're putting all of these contraptions in our communities where we're already suffering, and that's why we're against it. So I call it
Thank you.
liposuction approach to greenhouse gas reduction.
Okay, yeah, I got you. I like that,
If
Doctor
you
Wright.
don't change your,
Liposuction
if you,
approach.
if you don't change your, yeah, if you don't change your behavior, guess what? The fat comes right back. So you can
Okay.
suck it out, but without changing your behavior, it's coming back.
Okay.
I'm gonna make that an acronym. We gonna lag behind liposuction greenhouse gas. You're gonna lag behind other places using that approach. You're gonna be
Right.
lagging behind, Doctor Wright. I got you, Doctor Wright.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go to another question. So we all of I think many of us, Dr. Bullard, was a esteemed alum of Alabama A&M University. Go Bulldogs! I am as
Go
well.
Bulldog.
And we got Dr. Wright, HBCUs, and also tribal colleges. I'm going to combine a couple questions. How can we get HBCUs and tribal colleges to work together? And how can we make sure that we're using STEM in a way to help push for science advancements, but also make progress on environmental justice and social justice issues? So I'm not sure who wants to take that first. Dr. Bullock, you want to take that
Let
first?
me
Go ahead.
take it because I'm the
Yeah.
oldest. Uh,
Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Wilson, Alabama A&M. Bob Bullard, Alabama A&M. Dr. Beverly Wright, Grambling University. Peggy Shepard, Howard University. Our universities, and I'm going to speak for HBCUs, have always pushed us out and wanted us to excel. And we've already had that justice lens give back. And I think it's important to understand that the model of an HBCU, there are things that can be borrowed that cut across all of the minority serving institutions, MSIs, with a Hispanic serving institution, Asian serving, or Indian serving, where those models and prototypes and the way that it works for us, some of them can work for others. I don't think you can take the template exactly, pick it up and put it down, because there are differences in terms of tribal colleges and where they're located and the relationship that they have in many cases with their nations. But in terms of taking young people who in many cases many people have written off, we take them and then we give them the information, we give them the love, we nurture them, and we tough love sometimes, and then we encourage them to go on to excel, but also to give back. Don't just say I made it on our own, because none of us on this call made it on our own. Somebody helped us. That's, I think, we need to have more of our institutions, our minority serving institutions, and there are funding programs that are coming down that encourage that work. More monies need to go to our minority serving institutions. If we look at climate solution funding from the federal government, only 1% of those $34 billion go to HBCUs. Of the monies from foundations that go to dealing with climate solutions, only 1% of those 37 point something billion dollars go to HBCUs. So if we're not included in the solutions, and the solutions are being developed somewhere else, in many cases the same universities, I'm not going to call them out, that have funded these false solutions and taken all that money from the oil and gas. I live in Texas, and you probably will know some of those schools. They don't have the solutions. We have to be included in those solutions. Otherwise, those false solutions will leave us out and will damage us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can't be funding colonial, extractive, pain pimping science by primarily white institutions where the HBCUs, the MSIs, are the communities where the people are dealing with the problems. So
Thank
not
you.
just the community should be at the front line, should be at the front of the line. The HBCUs and indigenous colleges, AAPI colleges, because they're at the front, they're at the communities too.
Yes.
That's why they need to be funded. It's more efficient use of dollars
Yes.
when you fund MSIs. You get more impact from the dollars when you fund MSIs. Let me stop talking. Dr. Wright, Peggy, y'all want to chime in on that, or we want to go to another question? Y'all get me excited. It's early in the morning. I need to wake up, but thank you. Anybody else want to chime in?
We can go to another question. I just want to say that, the indigenous communities really suffer from our military complex. We hear this a lot. I mean, we have all the oil and gas next to us, and they have everything else that's extremely dangerous on their lands that continues. So I think the way that HBCUs and indigenous colleges can come together would be around these types of issues. And there have been attempts to do so, Bob.
Yeah.
If you remember, out of Clark Atlanta University years ago, there was a consortium that was developed that included indigenous colleges or MSIs as well. That is gone. I think it needs to come back.
It was funded by DOE, HBCU,
DOE funded it
MI,
years ago.
Environmental Technology Consortium. It was a 10-year project, and that was a model. Yeah,
it was a model that's been lost.
And maybe that new TIC-TAC, I don't like the acronym EPA, but that new TIC-TAC, Technical Assistance Center opportunity, could be an opportunity that can kind of bring that model back that y'all has talked about. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna pick out one last question. I'm not sure which one. I see there's a question about integrating reparations to the EJ movement. There's a question about potential negative impacts of Justice 40 on EJ communities. I'm gonna try to combine it in some way. Is there a way for us to make sure that Justice 40 doesn't negatively impact our communities? I think y'all talked about this. And then to make sure it doesn't impact, how does a reparations framework? I think Peggy, you talked about, Dr. Bullard, you talked about it. How does a reparations framework help with the implementation? And Dr. Wright, you did too, talk about all the basic environmental slavery folks have been dealing with in the Gulf Coast for decades. So who wants to chime in on that kind of combined question? Go ahead, Peggy.
Justice 40, if it was really looking at direct investment instead of simply benefits, can be seen as a way to repair and to reparate. There are many ways that we can have a different vision of how we use existing budgets. Why not look at every disadvantaged community and call it a green zone and say that we're going to take funds from DOT, DOE, from HUD, from all of those 20 federal agencies that are subject to Justice 40? How did they all aggregate the funds that they're already using to repair the legacy of pollution in targeted communities? So I think there are many ways to think about reparations, how we repair the legacy of harm. And I think we can simply develop the vision to do that because the funding and the resources are there. It's simply the vision and the political will.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the eco districts concept, green zones, eco districts, I think those align well with what you just stated. Who wants to, Dr. Wright or Dr. Go ahead, Dr. Bullard.
Let me just say this. We have data that can show how to extract the dollars that can advance reparation, repairing, and providing justice. Racial redlining. We don't even have to go all the way back to slavery. We can go back to the 30s and 40s with the racial redlining, and the neighborhoods that were racially redlined 100 years ago are more prone to flooding. Black neighborhoods. Okay, so that's flooding money. They're more likely to have more pollution. That's the pollution money, EPA. They're more likely to have more health disparities. That's HHS. They're more likely to be urban heat islands. They're more likely to deal with have more COVID. So there's the science and there's the data to build in reparations. It probably won't be a term that can be passed through Congress, but you can deal with it, whatever you call it. You don't have to call it. You can just do it. And so we're talking about monies. You know, the civil rights movement and racism was Wesley V. Ferguson, 1896, separate and equal. That was transportation. Codified Jim Crow. So I'll stop there because I know Dr. Wright wants to say something. But we have the data, we have the science, we have the information to do the reparation when it comes to environmental and economic justice.
And just to add before Dr. Wright goes, I'm gonna add to your comment. We gotta make sure we do this right and get this reparation so we won't have climate redlining. Folks are already dealing with climate redlining. I want all y'all use that term because I want y'all can use it better than me. But thank you for that. Just want to add that to your lexicon. Go ahead, Dr. Wright. You can close us out.
Yeah, I just want to say that I really have no interest in merging Justice Party with reparations. Okay. Reparations is reparations, doggone it, and we are due. And I want to keep pushing for reparations. And if you can do an amortization table for all kinds of things, they know how to figure out how much we should be paid for the suffering of our ancestors, moving on down to what is now carried on into the next year. So to me, that's a shortcut. So now we're going to get reparations through something. No, other groups have gotten reparations, and everybody want to talk about what we're going to do with the money. If it's my reparations money, you don't have nothing to do with it. About how I use it, where it goes, it's mine. Now you want to talk about climate and Justice Party? That's separate. As long as we keep this separate, because we get cheated. We get the consent decree money. You know what that is. Little to nothing. Nope, I want my reparations. We've had a conference in New Orleans each time with our students talking about reparations. And it was really funny to see that old people were more radical about reparations than young people. That means we need a lot of education to happen with those 60s people.
I was always trying to merge the question. I was always trying to merge the question. I wasn't trying to. I was trying to get it. Go ahead, Dr. Bullard.
I was saying, Dr. Wright was saying that the old people are one that's fighting for reparations. And I say, and we need it quick. We know why we were fighting hard.
Y'all say you in your 70s. I got you.
Now.
I got
now,
you.
Right now.
I got you. Dr. Wright said we want our reparations now, and we want the other. That's different money. We want, and I'm from Mississippi. I understand that need for reparations, but for all the Black folks, and that case, that's special status. So we got a special status because we deal with all the racism. We got a special status with actually being repaired and restored. So no, thank you for this powerful discussion. I would love to have more time with y'all because I love speaking with y'all. I know everybody else would love to have more time, but we have sessions that start at 11:10. So thank you. Thank you for the audience. This is a great kickoff to day 2. Love talking to the EJ icons. People I really respect and look up to, mentors in the field. And let's move on to our next sessions. Hopefully we have the same energy, same impact, best practice. Let's learn some solutions. And again, get to that action and those reparations that Dr. Wright's talking about. Appreciate y'all. Enjoy the rest of the day. Y'all take care. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yep.